Today, our guest is Francisco Aguiar. We'll be talking about data and analytics within the health ecosystem. And we are going to talk about a lot more. So don't go away.
Interrompemos aqui esta excelente conversa porque estamos muito entusiasmados em anunciar a primeira edição do Bootcamp Cruzamento. Prepara-te para mergulhar no cruzamento entre a saúde e a tecnologia, com a possibilidade única de aprender com líderes portugueses destas áreas. Além disso, vais ainda ter a oportunidade de assistir ao primeiro live de um episódio deste podcast. Fica atento à nossa agenda, serão 5 sessões online imperdíveis, a começar no dia 28 de maio e seguindo pelo mês de junho. Durante todo o Bootcamp, terás a oportunidade de participar ativamente, aprofundando as questões que mais te interessam. Fica atento aos próximos anúncios para conheceres os líderes inspiradores que vão orientar cada uma das sessões e garante já o teu lugar nesta experiência exclusiva. Para mais informação, visita-nos nas nossas redes sociais e por agora, de volta à entrevista.
Welcome to this episode of the Cruzamento Podcast. Before we start, if you enjoy our content, please consider giving us a 5-star rating on our podcast app to support our mission and spreading the knowledge. Now, on to the show. Today, we're exploring the intersection of technology and healthcare. I'm André Correia, and I'm joined by my co-host, Daniel Gedalha.
Hello and welcome to another show of Cruzamento Podcast. Today we have Francisco Aguiar with us. Hello, Francisco, and very welcome to this show.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. Yeah.
Cheers. And Francisco, our very first question in 30 seconds, who is Francisco?
Okay, so a tough one. Well, let me start by saying I'm a father of 3 children. And I'm pointing that out because the youngest actually turns 2 months today. So
Congrats.
it's thank you very much. It's been busy and hectic and wonderful all at the same time. So that's where we are, and that's not my day job. So I'm also a senior account executive in BI for All for our life sciences vertical, and I would say this enables me to join 2 passions I have. One is solving problems, and that's something that I've always had throughout my own childhood, and I've been able, luckily, to bring that into adulthood. And also, I have a profound respect and a lot of interest in the great world of healthcare. So that's what I'm currently able to do, and I've been doing that for over 10 years, I think, in healthcare. So with almost 20 years, 18 years of experience, not 20 yet, but of those 18, I've been able to have 10 fully dedicated to healthcare with data and analytics. So that's been wonderful.
That's great, Francisco, and we'll definitely be resolving some challenges on this interview.
Great.
So, but before we get in deep dive into data, into analytics, into the health ecosystem, and into before all, of course, let me ask you: if we look at the bigger picture, how is at the moment the Portuguese healthcare sector and maybe pharma progressing in the digital transformation journey they are going through?
Right. So there isn't. I would say there isn't one trend, and maybe I could break this down, starting with pharma. And if we look at big pharma, Portugal is a small market for big pharma. Mm-hmm. So we what we usually see and with our customers is that there is a regional framework or guidelines that they will follow. Bigger markets such as Germany and France have much bigger weight, so they're able to push for innovation much more. Mm-hmm. But when we look at the biotech landscape, it's a bit different because we actually have a very good ecosystem for biotech, and we have a few here in Portugal, very, very close connected with academia, of course. I think we have over I hope I don't get the number wrong, but I think it's over 15 biotech companies in Portugal. So it's I think very healthy. And in recent news, we've had Johnson & Johnson creating an innovation hub in Portugal as well for their pharma side of the company. So I think there is a lot to explore, definitely, but we do have the right ecosystem for it. Absolutely. When we talk about healthcare itself, and maybe comparing with other market or other countries, I saw a study. It was from 2022, so there might be some changes, but in broad aspects, Portugal is facing similar problems as the rest of the countries in Europe. The top three challenges in the region were bureaucracy, of course, also the cost of technology and finding the right tools for the job, let's say. And Portugal, or specifically for Portuguese clinicians, they've reported bureaucracy and finding the right tools as the top two. The third one was training staff on new technology. And if we switch from numbers to people, this actually is reflected in what we've seen, because we have a human problem, I think, in healthcare. Clinicians, they're frustrated, they're burned out potentially.
Yep.
Because their lack of time. They have loads of patients. They don't have the time to go through all of them. And one of the premises of digital transformation is to solve that exactly. Yeah.
And Francisco, that's a very interesting one. As you talk about lack of time, that comes to mind data, and you mentioned as well ecosystem, and data, especially in healthcare, then equal to data privacy, which is extremely important. Maybe, Francisco, could you talk us through the role of Before All, and how does your organization ensure data privacy across operations in healthcare and technology, always balancing insights with privacy concerns?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and just to share a bit of what we do, Before All is a company which we're turning 20 this year. And throughout those 20 years, our core is in fact data and analytics, and today advanced analytics. From those 20 years, a lot of that has been working with life sciences companies. So we bring the subject matter expertise on the table as well, and so from one aspect, there's a number of frameworks that we know need to be companies need to abide by, from SOX compliance to general procedures, private sensitive information from patients. And I would say, you mentioned insights. Insights are the tip of the iceberg, I would say. Because that's the visible part, the actionable part. Even what we don't see, what's under the surface, is in fact everything that needs to happen to make that data actionable. And that's also where we come in, from the starting point, from getting the data from its disparate, multiple, located in many places, sources. We need to ensure that it's the data is sourced in a compliant way, especially in this industry. We're talking about people's most sensitive data. We're talking about patients who are in many cases in a fragile condition, that need to be trusting a company to process their data. We start from there. We also ensure that throughout the different transformations that happen from the source systems to the insights, that this is observable. People know the changes that the data goes through, why, where, when. So that's a lot of what we do to ensure privacy from start to finish, I would say.
And Francisco, just picking up on that, and you mentioned that there is a lot of sensitive data, and you need to protect that data as well. So that make us think about data governance, right? So could you explain how BI for All addresses interoperability challenges in the data governance, and is it following the fair data principles?
Yeah. I think, and I'm kind of smiling because this is something that we definitely see today. This isn't. I don't think it's a trend. It's here to stay. The thinking of data as fair data, so findable and accessible, interoperable and reusable. And what we're seeing more and more is a fair data associated, or actually being the pillar for data marketplaces. Something like a data marketplace, and I can deep dive there a bit more, but this needs to have data governed transversally. And this actually stems from a data strategy. And maybe this kind of goes a step back, and then another step back, and another. But the company, any company has a strategy, and that's where their data strategy needs to stem from. And that's also where we try to start with our customers in this industry or in others, ensuring that their data strategy ties out to their overall strategy. And then this stems into the governance as well as the quality of the data, because that's and on a side note, data needs to be good. Any insight coming from the data needs to be good. It needs to be governed as well, of course, making sure the right people have access, making sure that it's properly documented. And all this going into data marketplaces, which are a new paradigm, which I think is here to stay, with regards to how data is used. On one hand, being enabled by the IT functions, but being widespread across business functions in companies.
It's quite interesting. You mentioned on the data marketplace, and we know that also in Europe there is a transformation looking at electronic health records. Maybe Francisco, looking at what is happening therefore across Europe, could you explain the EU's evolving stance on electronic health records and its impact on the ecosystem and patients?
Yeah, well, first, I think European Union is ticking the right boxes, because this we're talking about, going back to interoperability, we're talking about a patient, a Portuguese patient with an example, being able to share their medical history with an expert from a different country, and they can have access to the same systems in different countries. That's one of the basic challenges that this interoperability that the EU frameworks bring to the table. Of course, and from a regulations perspective, we also have the AI Act, which I think it's crucial, because one thing is being able to share your data everywhere. Another is making sure that people use your data correctly. And then this brings additional use cases. If, as an example, if pharma companies for R&D are able to use the full medical history of patients in a compliant way, going back to governance, making sure that only the right people have access to the right subset of data. But if they can use the full medical history, we're talking about not only a higher volume of data, we're talking about better insights, better patient cohorts selected over a bigger area. So I think there's a lot to be gained from this interoperability on EHRs.
And let's bring the Gen AI into the conversation there as well, Francisco, because obviously it's the hot topic at the moment, right? But when we talk about data analytics and advanced data analytics, actually, and data insights, as you've mentioned as well, and this is also leading us to decision making, where Gen AI probably can give us a little bit of a help there. So, how does Gen AI leverage those data insights that you were referring to anticipate market changes and assist in this strategic decision-making process?
So, on a very personal opinion, I might not be the best person to advocate for Gen AI as being the humanity-saving platform, something of the sorts. It is a very valid tool, and a tool that, with the right use cases, can definitely increase productivity across not only this industry, but across many industries. But let's get our feet back on the ground. It's a tool, and you're talking about insights and how Gen AI can support that. You need data. I was reading recently, and I can't pinpoint where, but someone wrote that data engineering is more important than data science.
Okay.
I'm not saying that's my stance. I think they're equally important disciplines. But the point there is, Gen AI can be the cherry on top of the cake, but you need the rest of the cake. So you need the data. You need structured data and unstructured data. And you have much, much more data unstructured nowadays that you can aggregate together, put together to build insights from it, definitely. But Gen AI is not all AI. Taking market analysis as an example, you have very good use cases for predictive models that take internal and external data, competitive intelligence as an example, and create good insights. And then Gen AI can be that productive tool that answers questions specific and goes from large documents and large analysis to this is the number you're looking for. I think that's the big value of Gen AI. It has a lot of value. In itself, it's a very fluent tool without knowledge of the business.
Very interesting, Franciscan. We really like the fact that you are now alluding to practical examples. So let's stay in that space and maybe looking at real world examples of data and AI governance that is so important. Can you therefore share practical cases where effective data and AI governance strategies have made a difference in organizations?
Yes. So, and to put into context, we're with our customers, we work with in multiple functions. So we have fortunately examples from R&D and supply chain and commercial, and I think starting, let's say from R&D perspective, and I won't go into the whole AI discovering new molecules, but even starting simpler, the regulatory process is a pain. I was going to say something I can't say. It's a pain in the behind, if you will, if you'll allow this one, because it's a very thorough process. It comes from extensive documentation on clinical trials, and there Gen AI has a very good use case and something that we've done already, which is making sure that data, and we're talking about internal documentation, about emails, ensuring that it gets searchable. So going back to the fair data, making sure that data is accessible, it's findable, and of course that we can produce insights on top of that. And asking questions and receiving responses from a regulatory perspective really helps people do their jobs and actually focus on what is their core activity. Then on supply chain, there are very good examples with backorder prediction as an example, and this is something that from a pharma company's perspective, well, on one hand, it's their image. It's the pharma company's image towards
reputation. This is really very important. Can you elaborate, Francis? Because this is really important. The backlog and as well stockouts and so on. Can you? I like that example. Mm-hmm.
And there we were able to create a prediction model that, based on those internal and external factors, was able to alert the supply chain folks that they need more inventory or less. So it's about optimizing, and then you start being able to talk about seasonality. You know that flu season comes in, and certain items will be more requested, but also making sure that not only pharmacies but also hospitals get their supplies when they need it, because this is a core aspect in many ways. Thinking about medtech, if there's a surgery but there's no equipment, there's impact to someone's life. So it's not only about saving money for the pharma company. It also it's reflected on someone's life, and I think that this one is it's something that I'm a bit proud of, because you see that consequence, that benefit. So we were able to create those prediction models that were made available to the supply chain folks in plan and inventory areas, so that they could dispatch more or less stock when needed. Yeah.
First, but before giving it to Andre, for our audience, this is so massively important. Just that you have an idea. So some drugs, the lead time from drug substance, drug product, finished product can take to 2-3 months. So there is a lag, and what Francisco is alluding to is extremely important, and it can save patients' lives. I apologize, Francisco, to have that one.
No. Thank you for that, because I really think it's important, and then just to add on top of that, let's say, and looking at the commercial aspect of pharma companies, you have the sales representatives that go out to hospitals and to pharmacies and contact clinicians, and ensuring that the supply chain is aware of that, because usually there's a silo. There's the commercial aspect of it, yes, and then there's the supply chain aspect. If you break down that silo, and if you're able to send out the information coming from the opportunities the sales reps have, this contributes to better stock management as well. And that's also something that we've been working on with some of our customers. And I think it's great, and it's very interesting to see the cultural change as well, because that's also needed.
And I think that example is brilliant, Francisco, because it really covers a little bit of everything that we've been speaking about during this conversation, from having the data, processing the data, having the Gen AI and other models and analytics that can make those predictive models that you were referring to. That's also a good example of a digital transformation, bringing people, processes and technology all into the same place. But then, and you also have alluded to that at the end, I'm going to ask you to elaborate a little bit more, which is something that sometimes we forget about, is measuring the results, which is also very important. And again, the data is here to help. So how do you measure the end results in the digital transformation? Examples, for example, like the ones you just gave, leveraged by this data analytics. So what are kind of the biggest measurements and KPIs that you typically use to measure success?
Let me answer that sideways, because the first part of the answer would be the consultant's answer. That depends. And the point there is, and from my experience, the outcomes are where you start. So what outcomes does a solution not just digital solutions, but any solution. What outcomes does it want to, or do you want to achieve with it? And so we're talking more about OKRs, if you will, the objectives and key results, than measuring something at the end. Just to be clear, because I think that's something that you need to assess from the start of anything. A digital tool is only as good as its adoption. So you can build a Ferrari, but if I don't know how to drive it and I don't have high-speed driving lessons, it will stay in the garage. And that means you want to understand what to measure from the start. So your outcomes, this is what you want to achieve, and this is how you plan to measure it. Not only how it will perform once implemented, but the roads towards it. Is the company moving in the right direction to adopt this tool? And in that way, you ensure that the solution is ready for the organization, but the organization is also ready for the solution. I think that's what is key. And because the KPIs to measure success, they will depend on the type of solution and on the function, on the objectives, I think.
Yeah, but that definition is really important. Francisco, so we are arriving to the end, but there is one question we want to ask you, is a strategic question in trends. So what emerging trends should our audience be aware of regarding data analytics, AI, and digital transformation in healthcare?
So we're saving the tough one for last. That's another session in terms of trends. But so there is a lot to do. That's the first thing. I think we talked about data and the electronic health records being interoperable. That's the start of it all. I think. Well, it started before, but there is a long road ahead, I think. Mm-hmm. But with this increased volume of data, we see also a significant shift, where I think we will see, to put it in a better way, more and more a shift towards precision medicine. If you have access to the patient's sensitive data, of course, in a compliant way, but if you have access to the patient's data, you can pinpoint the right drug for their condition. So precision medicine, definitely. Then I think we'll see new models or more models of patient centricity coming up. And I think there will be a lot of focus not only on healthcare practitioners, but also on pharma in prevention and early treatment. And if someone thinks pharma has no profit, let's say, from prevention, no, there is a lot to gain for pharma companies in building these partnerships, because if you have access to a patient's history throughout the disease life cycle, this is a trove of information that you have available for future studies. So it's a virtuous cycle, I think. And of course, this is good for pharma companies. This is good for healthcare practitioners, and ultimately, it's very good for the patients. And I would say maybe another one, invisibles, just to throw this one away. And because we've seen a lot of conversation about wearables, but there are, and this is something I've seen, and with a very, very specific example, and for people to look for this, the emerald product. If you search for emeralds and monitoring, you will find it for anyone listening. And this is something that was developed with the MIT, and I think there are already some advanced studies together with Novartis. And what's the idea? Patient monitoring, but without any sensor touching the patient. So through Wi-Fi, you're able to monitor the person's gait, their breathing, a number of a number of topics, a number of biomarkers that will support monitoring in very important conditions: Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, mental disorders, even. And these are a number of topics that, for data and analytics, there's a world to explore, I would say. And Gen AI, of course, I think we will find use cases for Gen AI to be the cherry on top of all these many cakes.
Francisco, thank you very much, and we'll definitely search for it and we'll put into the show notes. It seems really interesting.
Great.
What was not invisible was a lot of the points that we've discussed here. So, and we've talked about the Portuguese healthcare going through this digital transformation journey. We've talked about electronic health records in Europe, but also in Portugal. We've talked about the fair principles of data and interoperability and governance as well. And we end up with the strategic trends within the healthcare sector. The very last question, Francisco, if our audience wants to know more about you or know more about the BI for All, where can they find you online?
Well, definitely on LinkedIn. You can search me, Francisco Aguiar. And you can also head on to our website, BI for All. So that's BI for number 4 all .pt. That's us.
Excellent, Francisco. Thank you so much. And thank you to you that you're listening to us. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our podcast for the latest episodes. Also, connect with us on LinkedIn, Instagram, and your favorite podcast apps. Also, check out our show notes for more details, as we have alluded to. Francisco, thank you so much.
Thank you for
the
having
time.
me. Definitely, it was a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Francisco. Bye for now, and see you in our next episode.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.